Imagine walking down your local main street right now. Just, a normal day in your hometown.
Right, just running errands or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. But try to visualize this. For every single neighbor you recognize on that street, there are 50 out-of-town tourists trailing right behind them.
Oh my gosh, just a wall of people.
Right. You wave to your mail carrier. Well, they are flanked by 50 people taking photos.
Oh.
You try to grab a coffee, and the barista is serving a line of 50 international visitors before they can even, get to your order.
It sounds like an absolute nightmare, honestly.
It sounds like a totally absurd thought experiment. But
Yeah.
the thing is, in one specific European country, this isn't a hypothetical at all.
Yeah.
It's their daily mathematical reality.
It really breaks your brain a little bit to try and picture it. But, I mean, when you look at the raw data, that level of saturation fundamentally rewires how a society functions. You just can't operate a normal town when the guest-to-host ratio looks like that.
No, you really can't. And that is exactly what we are digging into today. We have a fascinating stack of source material for this deep dive.
Yeah, we've got some incredible numbers today.
We do. We're looking specifically at data from the United Nations Tourism Department. And this is all beautifully compiled by visual capitalists and mental floss.
Which is so helpful because they really lay it out clearly.
They really do. And this data ranks the countries where tourists mathematically outnumber the local residents.
Right, the places that are just swamped.
Exactly. We are exploring these extreme global tourism hubs to, well, basically help you figure out where you might go for a flawlessly catered vacation and where the locals are just statistically overwhelmed.
Which is a huge factor when you're planning a trip.
Oh, massive. So, okay, let's unpack this, because to understand how tourist saturation actually works on a national level, you cannot just look at the global averages.
No, the averages hide the real story.
Right. We have to start with the most extreme mathematical outlier on this entire list.
And it is an outlier that honestly almost looks like a spreadsheet error when you first read it.
It really does.
But it provides the absolute best lens into the mechanics of what we call extreme tourism.
So the #1 country on this UN list is Andorra.
Right, Andorra.
And the statistics here are just staggering. In Andorra, there are 50.86 international tourist arrivals for every single resident.
50 to 1.
50 to 1. That equals about 4.2 million tourists visiting each year.
Which is a massive influx.
Huge. And they're all flocking to this landlocked, tiny co-principality in the Pyrenees Mountains.
Tucked right there on the border between France and Spain.
Exactly. But here's the kicker. The local population is less than 90,000 people.
Which is an incredibly small baseline. I mean, it's minuscule.
Just to really ground those numbers, the source material points out that American cities like Green Bay, Wisconsin, or Erie, Pennsylvania, they actually have more full-time residents than the entire country of Andorra.
That really puts it in perspective.
It does. But wait, I have to stop right here. Because logistically, how is this physically possible?
Right, just the physical realities of it.
Yeah, like if I invite 50 people over to my house for a weekend, my plumbing backs up, the trash cans overflow, and I run out of hot water by Saturday morning.
Oh, for sure. It's a disaster.
So how does a country of fewer than 90,000 people not just, physically collapse under the weight of 4 million people's trash and their water needs and the traffic?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the mechanics of per capita data completely reframe how a local economy is built.
Okay, how so?
Well, when we usually talk about extreme tourism, we picture massive global hubs, right? New York, Tokyo, London.
Right, places that get millions of visitors.
Exactly, millions upon millions of visitors. But those cities also have millions of residents and these massive municipal budgets to absorb the impact. The denominator in that equation is huge. But in Andorra, a tiny baseline population mathematically catapults the country to the top of the list, but it also forces an infrastructural anomaly. The economy doesn't just feature a tourism sector, it becomes a year-round tourism engine.
Okay, I think I have a way to visualize this. It feels like it's like running a massive corporate server farm out of a tiny broom closet.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Like the hardware, the actual local population is incredibly small. But the bandwidth they have to process, the 4.2 million tourists is just gargantuan.
Right.
So to keep the closet from literally catching fire, you need an entirely disproportionate cooling system.
That is a perfect analogy. And the cooling system in Andorra is its massive, disproportionate infrastructure.
Not the roads and stuff.
Exactly. The roads winding through the Pyrenees aren't just paved and maintained for locals commuting to the grocery store. The national budget allocates funds to maintain those roads, specifically for thousands of heavy tour buses.
Oh, wow.
And the water treatment plants and the sewage systems, they are not scaled for 90,000 people. They are built with the capacity to handle the peak winter ski season influx.
That makes sense. But what about the human capital?
What do you mean?
Well, if you only have 90,000 residents, and a chunk of those are kids and retirees, who is changing all the hotel sheets, who is driving the buses and running the ski lifts for 4.2 million people, you literally just don't have enough humans.
You don't. You really don't. And that exposes the hidden mechanism of a 50-to-1 ratio.
Which is?
The commuter workforce. Andorra relies heavily on a massive daily and seasonal influx of labor from neighboring Spain and France.
Oh, so they commute across the border.
Exactly. The local residents are essentially the management class of a sovereign hotel. The supply chains, the labor forces, the daily food imports, they are all crossing a border constantly just to keep the server farm running, so to speak.
Which means the entire landscape and the daily rhythm of the country is completely dictated by the visitor.
Precisely. Andorra's tiny size isn't just a geographical footnote. It is the very reason this phenomenon exists in such a concentrated way.
Right.
But there is a hard ceiling to how much bandwidth one tiny mountain nation can handle. And that constraint leads us to a broader blueprint we see repeated as we move down the top tier of this list.
Well, let's follow that blueprint, because Andorra isn't alone in its tiny geography.
Not at all.
The runner-up on the UN data is Monaco, sitting at number 2 with 9.01 tourists per resident.
And their total population is only about 40,000.
Right. And this trend of tiny populations in unique locations absolutely dominates the top of the board.
Yeah, we see a really heavy concentration of microstates and island nations.
Exactly. Like Malta is number 3 with 6.26 tourists per resident. Iceland is number 4 at 5.58. Palau is number 5 at 5.28.
And it keeps going.
Yeah, further down in the top 20, you get the Bahamas at number 7, Bahrain at number 8, and Antigua and Barbuda at number 19.
There is a really clear pattern here of small populations, usually isolated by geography, leveraging what little space they have into massive tourist economies.
Now, looking at the data, I initially noticed this massive drop-off from Andorra's 51-to-1 ratio down to Monaco's 9-to-1 ratio.
It looks like a huge plunge.
It does, but I really want to challenge the idea that a drop in the ranking means the impact is small. 9-to-1 is still overwhelming.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about hosting a dinner party, where for every one person living in your house, there are 9 demanding guests.
You'd lose your mind.
Right.
Yeah.
You aren't relaxing. You are entirely consumed by serving them. But it makes me wonder about the specific draw here.
Okay.
With all these distinct islands and microstates clustered together, are tourists swamping these places for the exact same reasons? Or does the data show different underlying motivations?
It shows very distinct motivations, and it really comes down to how these tiny nations choose to utilize their limited space.
Like how they market themselves.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the source material reveals 2 primary tourism models driving these astronomical ratios.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is the luxury and resort model, which is epitomized by Monaco and the Bahamas. Monaco is poached on the French Riviera with a tiny footprint.
Right.
And people fly in from all over the world specifically for the high-end casinos, the luxury resorts, the beaches, and the famous yacht harbor.
They are paying a premium to be pampered in a highly manicured environment.
Yes, exactly. The infrastructure there is entirely dedicated to exclusivity and luxury. But the second model is drastically different.
Okay.
It is the nature and culture model, which we see in places like Malta, Iceland, and Palau.
Ah, right, because you don't go to Iceland for the casinos.
No, you're not flying to Iceland to sit by a resort pool with a margarita. Visitors are navigating rugged terrain to see glaciers, volcanoes, and unique marine ecosystems.
So in a way, these island nations are essentially, they're exporting their terrain, right?
Oh, that's a good point.
Like usually, a country exports physical goods, cars or grain or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But Malta and Iceland are exporting their geography.
Yeah.
The catch is, the consumer has to physically travel into the factory to consume the product.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it. And because their landmass is so small, they face a severe carrying capacity problem.
They just run out of room.
Exactly. A microstate doesn't have the luxury of diversifying its economy with massive agricultural sectors or sprawling industrial manufacturing. Your land is your primary product.
So you really have to commit.
You do. You have to lean heavily into one of those models, luxury or nature, and perfect it. Monaco physically reclaims land from the sea to build more luxury real estate.
Wow.
And Iceland implements strict trail management and infrastructural pathways to move millions of people safely through fragile ecosystems without destroying the very product they are selling.
It is such a delicate balancing act.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Because while it makes complete logical sense that a tiny island or a micro-population hits statistical overload quickly, the phenomenon doesn't stop there.
No, doesn't.
As we move further into the UN data, this extreme ratio scales up to much larger nations,
Right.
and they are almost exclusively clustering in one specific region of the world.
Right.
It proves that having more tourists than locals is not just a quirky small country thing.
The data absolutely shifts when we look at the broader geographic trends. You start seeing countries with substantial land masses and millions of residents pulling off this exact same mathematical feat.
Europe vastly dominates the global tourism landscape here.
Completely.
Not only do European nations make up 4 of the top 5, Andorra, Monaco, Malta, and Iceland, but globally recognized, geographically large European nations completely dominate the top 20.
We're talking major players.
Yeah. We are looking at Albania at number 6, Croatia at number 9, and then we see heavyweights like Austria, Portugal, and Greece.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can easily wrap my head around a tiny harbor town of 40,000 people like Monaco catering entirely to visitors. But a country like Greece has over 10 million residents.
It's massive by comparison.
Exactly. To bring in enough tourists to outnumber your own massive population requires an entirely different scale of national coordination.
It is a completely different logistical beast. When a sprawling country with vast rural landscapes and major metropolitan cities still manages to bring in more international tourists than its entire population, you are witnessing an incredibly sophisticated, well-oiled tourism machine.
It has to be.
It does. And the reason Europe dominates this category so thoroughly is because these larger nations possess a powerful advantage that the microstates simply don't have the real estate for.
Are you talking about the ability to absorb the spillover?
Yeah.
Like once the microstates are full, the crowds just migrate to the bigger countries.
Well, it is partly that, but it is primarily their dual threat capability.
Dual threat.
Yeah. Think back to the microstates. They had to choose a lane. Monaco chose luxury resorts. Iceland chose rugged nature.
Right.
They lack the physical space to do both at a massive scale. But larger European countries succeed because their geography and history allow them to offer both simultaneously.
Oh, interesting.
They have deeply historical, culturally rich urban areas. Think of the ancient ruins of Athens or the classical architecture of Vienna. But just a short distance away, they possess world-class nature, like the Greek islands or the Austrian Alps.
Okay, yeah. So they aren't just attracting one type of traveler. The history buff who wants to spend a week in museums and the outdoor enthusiast who wants to ski or sail, they are both booking flights to the exact same country.
Exactly. They compound their visitor numbers by appealing to entirely different demographics at the exact same time.
That's incredibly smart.
It is. But to pull that off without the country just grinding to a halt requires massive, highly regulated infrastructure.
Right. You need a way to move all those people.
Exactly. They utilize tourism taxes to fund intricate railway systems, regional airports, and highways that effortlessly siphon people from the historic city centers directly out to the coasts or the mountains.
And that requires managing 2 completely different types of infrastructural stress.
Oh, absolutely.
Like in Greece, the government has to figure out how to implement timed entry ticketing to stop millions of footsteps from literally eroding the steps of the Acropolis.
Yes.
While simultaneously managing the environmental impact of thousands of cruise ships dropping anchor in their coastal waters.
It is a phenomenal balancing act, and this raises an important question, actually. Think about your own travel habits for a second.
Okay.
When you book a trip to a larger country on this list, like Portugal or Croatia, which of those demographics are you falling into? Are you contributing to the dense crowds in the historic city centers, or are you joining the masses out in nature?
Yeah.
Or because the country's infrastructure makes it so frictionless, are you doing both on the exact same trip?
I mean, most of us are definitely doing both. We just show up and expect the ancient plazas to be spotless and the beaches to have perfect amenities, without ever considering the sheer scale of national funding and logistics it takes for a country to provide both experiences simultaneously to millions of temporary guests.
And the fact that these large nations can manage that dual threat while keeping their own domestic economies running for millions of citizens is really a testament to how aggressively Europe has honed its hospitality industry over the last century.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive talking about that classic tension we all feel when planning a vacation, right?
Right, the struggle.
The desire for an authentic, untouched local experience versus the desire for a destination that actually has the infrastructure to make your trip comfortable and easy.
It's always a trade-off.
It is. But based on this UN data, a very clear roadmap emerges for your planning. If your absolute priority is finding a quiet, untouristy corner where you are the only foreigner in the cafe, these highly ranked countries, whether it is the extreme microstate of Andorra or the massive dual threat of Greece, they are going to make that genuinely difficult.
Yeah, the math and the infrastructure are simply working against you.
Exactly.
But conversely, if you want a destination that is flawlessly equipped to handle your needs, where the trains run on time, the menus are accessible, and the sites are safely managed without the stress of navigating a completely unadapted environment, these nations are the heavyweights.
For sure.
They have built their modern identities, their supply chains, and their national budgets around welcoming you.
Which is an incredible luxury for a traveler.
It really is. And that actually brings up a final thought I'd like to leave you with today.
Oh, lay it on us.
It is something that builds on this data and kind of challenges that very premise of the vacation struggle we opened with. When tourists outnumber locals to this extreme degree, our traditional definition of what constitutes an authentic experience might actually need a complete rewrite.
Wait, how do you mean?
Well, as travelers, we often treat tourism as something that interrupts local life.
Right.
We assume the real culture is happening behind closed doors, away from the bustling resorts and the guided tours. We feel guilty for being in the tourist trap.
We totally do.
But consider a place like Andorra with its 50-to-1 ratio, or the resort coasts of Monaco. If a nation's primary economic survival, its physical infrastructure, and the daily rhythm of its workforce are 100% built around catering to visitors, then hospitality is their local culture.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Welcoming people, managing those resorts, and operating those mountain passes, that is the authentic daily life of those residents.
Wow. That completely flips the script.
Yeah.
You aren't ruining the local flair by being there. Your presence is the literal bandwidth that keeps their servers running.
Exactly. Being a tourist in these places isn't missing out on the authentic local life. Being a tourist means you are actively participating in the very lifeblood of their society.
That is such a liberating way to look at it. You don't necessarily have to choose between a comfortable catered vacation and an authentic cultural experience. Because in these unique corners of the world, catering to you is the authentic experience.
It really is.
So keep that in mind the next time you find yourself standing in a crowd wondering where all the locals went. Chances are they are right in front of you executing the exact jobs their country was mathematically optimized to do.